In the last tutorial we looked at how to make a crying man, and in scene 1 I have one layer here called crying man, and it's only one frame long. This is crying man. So when I play the movie, Control Enter, this movie just loops. So that's what it is. He's just a crying man. It's a little bit boring. There's no sound. We can't hear him crying, so we'll look at how to incorporate sound into our animations later in these tutorials. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask myself, in my movie scene, how long is crying man going to be crying? So let's go just across and say, well, I'm going to give him 40 frames. I can change this later. And nothing's changing in this movie, so I'm just going to press F5. So now, crying man is going to stay on my movie scene for 40 frames. And what happens next? Well, what I want him to do is lift his head up and look at the audience. I want him to lift his head so we can see his eyes and his face. Maybe his hands go down onto the desk. There isn't a desk at the moment, so we'll need to put that in later. So let's see how we can make that happen. I'm going to make a new layer called Looking Man. He's just going to be looking at the screen. Now he doesn't start at the start of the movie. That's Crying Man. And Crying Man continues for 40 frames. So on the 41st frame, I'm going to press F6 on the Looking Man layer. This is Looking Man, F6. This is where Looking Man will start. Now the problem we have is that when I start to draw Looking Man, I really need to understand how big Crying Man was so that the shapes kind of look the same size and it looks reasonable. So that's going to be a problem, because when I go to frame 41, I cannot see Crying Man. What I can do is click my onion skin button, and this allows me to see what has happened in other movie frames. So let's click that. There we can see what's happening in some previous frames. We can see these Crying Man frames here. These brackets show us what was in previous frames in our movie. So that's useful. So in the Looking Man frame, I'm just going to start by drawing an oval which is about the same size as Crying Man's head. And he's looking up. I'm just going to break that apart. He's looking up, so maybe his head will be a little bit rounder, because he's looking now at the screen. Just maybe push that for his chin. Just make that a bit flatter. Something like that. Now another problem I have is that this color is not the same as Crying Man's face. So that's going to give me a problem. It needs to be the same color. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go into the Crying Man movie clip for a minute. I'm going to find his face. Is it locked? I think it's locked. Let's just find the layer that his head is on. It's that one, it's locked. Okay. Now I'm going to click on it. There's the color. That's the face that I want to copy the color from. And if I look at the color palette, that is the color. 254, 78, 78. Remember those numbers. 254, 78, 78. So I'm going to go back to scene 1, go back to my frame, and I'm going to type in here 254, 78, 78. And hopefully, when I do that, that color is exactly the same as Crying Man's face color. Okay? Now let's select all that and just turn him into a movie symbol called, what did I call him? Looking Man. This is going to be Looking Man. Okay? So let's go inside now and start to design Looking Man. Now, it's actually not as complicated as it could be, because I used some standard colors. For example, the head. Okay, that was the most difficult one. But his head is that color, 254, 78, 78. We also had hair. And his hair was just kind of messy looking hair. Let's look at Crying Man. Look at his hair. Do you see that? Kind of just a big mess of black. So let's use that idea. We'll change the paint bucket to black. We'll get the paintbrush. We'll choose probably a big size. That's okay. And we'll just try to make a messy hairdo. There we go. I've got to break it apart. I've got to figure out how to stop that from happening, but I haven't figured it out yet. So that's his hair. Now I'm going to look at his nose. Again, if you look at Crying Man's nose here, that's Crying Man. His nose is just a big black blob. So let's just make a big black blob on his face. And I'm going to break it apart. Okay, now then, eyes. We're kind of lucky here, because in the Crying Man movie clip, we can't see his eyes. So, brilliant. I've got control now to make up my own eyes. Just getting a bit complicated with the layers, so I'm going to lock everything and then unlock the eyes layer. Let's start to design some eyes. I'm going to start by designing them big. Okay? Nope, I don't want it to be black. I want it to be yellow. Yep, that's okay. Just going to break that apart. Come to the edge of the shape and press Control on the keyboard and click and drag. That's not really what I want. Control Z. I'm just going to zoom in on that. See if I can make that happen a bit easier. Control and why is it doing that? Come on, don't do that. That's a bit strange. I'm not sure why it's doing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything and delete it and try again. Break apart. Go to the edge. Press Control on the keyboard. That's what I want. That's what I want. Okay. So that's going to be an eye. Control minus. The eyes go under the hair. And we're going to make it a bit smaller. There's one eye. Let's animate it. So I'm going to convert it to a symbol called eye. I'm going to go inside it. I'm now inside the iMovie clip. And I'm just going to mess around with layer 1, which is the eye. So the eye is open like that for 10 frames. And then F6, and it changes, doesn't it? I'm going to press delete. Look at the onion skin. Isn't it helpful? The onion skin is allowing us to see what was in the previous iframes. If I turn off the onion skin, I can't see what that shape is. But when I use the onion skin, I can see what it looked like. And I'm just going to turn that into a line. Just make it a bit thicker. Brilliant. And it's just going to stay like that, like a line, for just a few frames. Nothing else changes. So I'm going to press F5. So turn off the onion skin. This is what my blink will look like. Bom, 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 bom. Okay, that's fine. Go back to Looking Man. We've got an eye. That is an instance of eye. I'm going to copy that. Control C, Control V. Use the transform tool just to flip it around. Try and make it the same size. Move it into position. Brilliant. We now have an eye. We also need a mouth. He's not happy, is he? He's crying. So I'm just going to make the mouth, lock the eyes layer. Let's work on the mouth. Ooh, that's too big, isn't it? And it's yellow. Control Z. Black. And a little bit smaller. And there we go. He's got a little sad mouth. These eyes look a bit weird, don't they? I'm going to actually go back into the eye for a minute. Just redesign that. Let's make a new layer called pupil. Pupil. And it's just a black dot in the middle of the eye. Brilliant. Go back to Looking Man. That's a bit better. Okay. Now then, he was wearing a red shirt, wasn't he? And his arms were kind of on his head before, but that's changed. He's now looking up. So maybe this is going to look a bit different. Let's make a new layer. I'm going to call it shirt. I could call it arms, of course. It's kind of up to you. Let's just thicken up the brush, and we'll start to imagine what his arms are currently like. That's a bit tricky. Maybe it's kind of like that, and it just kind of comes across, and his arms are there now. It's kind of like that. And let's just join it by doing that. And that's his shirt. So if I select all of that, I have to break it apart. Let's see if we can fill that with color. Yes, we can. Brilliant. Okay, it looks a bit weird. The shirt needs to be behind his head. That's better. And we can't really see the arms because the shirt color is all red. So I'm going to use the pencil tool, which is black, just to kind of draw some lines in to try and show where his hands are. Now I'm not going to animate his hands, so I'm not going to put anything on a different layer. I'm just going to choose a pink color. What was that color? What was that pink color I chose for his hands before in Crying Man? Do you remember those pink hands? Let's go and have a look. I've locked the hand layer, so I'm just going to unlock that. Look at the color. Oh, I've got to go inside. Okay. That color there is 255, 153, 153. Let's remember that. 255, 153, 153. Back to scene 1. Okay, we can just go back to Looking Man actually. Take the paintbrush, color. Okay, we'll change that in a minute. It's a pink color, isn't it? We'll make that a bit smaller, and we'll just kind of draw some hands. I don't have these on layers, different layers, so I'll just draw that as carefully as I can. It was 255, 153, 153. That was the color. So let's use that color, fill it in, Control, okay, let's select all that. Oi, Control Z, select that. Control C, Control V, spin it around, put that in place. It's not going to be very perfect, and I'm going to lose control because the hands are not on a different layer. Oh, that doesn't look very good, does it? How am I going to deal with that bit? Let's come to the edge of that if I can, and just push it in. That's better. Okay, wow. Now let's also just put a tear on his face. We've already got a tear here in the library, so I'm just going to borrow that. Let's call that tear. It goes above the head, and let's just drag a tear here. Okay, brilliant. We have Looking Man. Let's go back to scene 1 and play our movie. Control Enter. Oh, he doesn't last very long, does he, Looking Man? Okay, so let's say in our movie, Looking Man stays on the movie stage for another 40 frames. So that'll be 80. Let's do F5. Control Enter. And now he's looking. I'll tell you why this looks a bit weird. We can't see his red shirt, can we? In Crying Man. He should really have a red shirt here, but I haven't drawn it, so it looks a bit strange. We'll look at that in the next tutorial. In the meantime, have a go at creating Looking Man. I'll see you next time.